May all beings be happy. May all beings be healthy. May all beings be free from harm. May all beings love life. May all beings awaken. Welcome to another Cuke Audio podcast. I'm DC Puba of Cuke Audio and Cuke Archives, doing our bit to help preserve the legacy of Shunryu Suzuki and those whose paths cross his, and anything else that comes to mind. I pray that you and yours are safe and comfortable, free from economic hardship, and able to get out and do whatever it is you want within the limitations of the universal precept of do as little harm as possible. Now, today, I'm going to talk to you about religion. What is religion? And I talked with Chat GPT about it because it's sort of frustrating. And here's why. Here's how I got into this. You know, I was having a talk with my son Kelly, and he told me that he's been enjoying listening to, we both listen to Neil deGrasse Tyson. You know, he does these 15-minute things on Starlink, or whatever it's called, on YouTube. They're great, you know, on science or, you know, different things. But he's very knowledgeable, he's very articulate, he's fun, and he does his shows almost entirely with this comedian that he works with. And they're a funny team. So Kelly said he enjoyed listening to the to the atheists. And Kelly nor I were raised in atheist homes, but I was raised in a home where the word God did not stand for a being, you know. So it stood, for, I had ideas like cosmic consciousness or mind. My father would say mind. And non-substantial, beyond matter or something, So when I heard people talk about is there a God or isn't there a God, it didn't make much sense to me. It didn't seem like God is just a word for whatever the ground of being, but I didn't know that phrase. But I noticed I preferred the atheists because it was sort of atheists are on the other side, people talking about believing in God as if God was a being that, did things. What I call an action figure. So, it was fun for me to listen to Christopher Hitchens and Richard Dawkins and Bill Maher, make fun of religion and other people. I mean, it's, make fun of, but, after a while I go, okay, but you're just talking about people who take myth literally. That's not, and you're calling it religion, it's science, and I've talked about this before on podcasts, and media has dumbed down the conversation. I think there's a woman named, what was it, Karen Armstrong, who talked about religion. And she's not around anymore. I remember her from maybe up to 15 years ago or something. And she did comparative religion around the world and stuff. And she said there's been a definite movement toward simplistic literalism in religion in modern times, where the understanding is less subtle, less deep, less nuanced. But all right, so I hear these real smart guys, and like I said, I love Neil deGrasse Tyson talk about religion, and they're talking about junk religion, and it's a subset of religion. Like, to me, I'm what I call, people who take myth literally. And it seems to be all they know. And I want to say, well, wait a minute. Don't you know that there's that word stands for more than that? And, especially on, media and TV and movies, definitely, anything to do with religion, especially if they're doing a Bible movie or something, everything has to be actors. It has to be beings. But it's not true entirely. No, there are movies, why did Bodhidharma come from the West? Is that where did he come from the West? Yeah, why did Bodhidharma come from the West? And, a number of, Kurosawa Japanese films, they could capture something more subtle. And now the internet, again, it's, and the whole science versus faith thing, all of it is, I just always think, hey, you're missing out. You don't, you're just saying science versus action figure religion. So, and then I told Kelly, yeah, I like those guys too, but really they're spreading ignorance. When Neil deGrasse Tyson talks about science, he uses scientific way of thinking, scientific method. When he talks about religion, it's just his assumptions and prejudices, and it's incredibly poorly researched and doesn't really know his topic. Good Lord. The guy, so I talked to Chat GPT about it. And let me tell you, that's better than any, because I'm not good at doing research. I don't care that much. To me, it's just whatever's right in front of me, whatever's right here, whatever it is, that's my religion. I like Einstein's religion. And Suzuki Roshi said the same thing, that nature is the best teacher. But, all right, so I asked ChatGPT, and I'm gonna read you my discussion with it. I want to say one thing. One thing I said to Kelly was, Christopher Hitchens was on the Thom Hartmann show, THOM HARTMANN, who is, like the leading, intellectual progressive talk show person for a long, long time. Really great, really brilliant guy. And at some point, Hartman said to Hitchens, "Don't you feel sometimes like you're shooting fish in a barrel?" That's the way I feel. Well, isn't this pretty obvious? Darn, at this point, I guess my mic disconnected or something. I think I stopped it and restarted it here. And so it didn't record through my mic. It just recorded through the Mac like I'm doing now. So my thought is, well, I start thinking, God, Neil deGrasse Tyson especially, he could do better. And then he had a show on, one of his things, I think it was 23 minutes long, on being wrong. And some woman had asked him, what do you do when you're wrong, or are you ever wrong? And he talked about being wrong and the different levels of being wrong, and when great scientists were wrong and this and that. And at the end of it, he gets, again, into religion. And again, he's using the most simplistic idea of what religion is and what Christians are. Everybody in every religion thinks their religion is right and others are wrong. They pray to their God, and there's many gods, but they can't all be right. Just still back there in that. And so Uh, I asked Chat GPT, listen, for me, that's better than any other type of research. I don't like to do research. I don't like to read about this stuff too much. I like something just quick and simple. I am not I didn't go to college. I'm sort of on I write on the 5th grade level. Anyway, I asked ChatGPT, okay, what is religion? What's the etymology? And I'll tell you, the way I think of the meaning of the word religion is to reconnect. Well, that's exactly what it meant. I asked a Catholic priest friend once, well, how do you interpret original sin? He said it's the separation of heaven and earth. So, grace or awakening, enlightenment would be the reconnection of heaven and earth. And that's just what the word religion means. It means reconnecting with the divine. All right, so there we go. Then, all right, now I'm going to read you my conversation with Chat GPT. And let me tell you, I do not regard Chat GPT as a being or an entity. It is a service that has the entire internet at its immediate grasp. Anything that is not behind a paywall, anything that's available, it can get there. It can be wrong. It can get off on tangents. It's somewhat like dealing with a real person, but you can work with it to get to something pretty good. Depending on the topic, it's been pretty good on this. So I said, I wrote to it, I said, I listened to deGrasse Tyson talk about science, and I'm impressed. But when he talks about religion, I'm not impressed. He only talks about there being no proof of God, but to me, he's talking about people with a literal understanding of religion and of religious myths, stories, and parables. And so Chat says, it says here, it printed it up. And after we were through with this, I said, hey, could you put this into a file form for me? Right. So it makes itself assistant. And that's sort of true. And it says, that makes sense. Neil deGrasse Tyson approaches religion from a very empirical, scientific standpoint, which is valuable in some ways, but also quite limited when dealing with the deeper metaphorical and philosophical aspects of religious traditions. It sounds like you see religion as something more than just a set of claims to be proven or disproven, something richer, perhaps as a way of engaging with meaning, values, and the human experience. And then it keeps going. Wow, it says, many religious traditions have long acknowledged that their stories and parables are not meant to be taken literally. Figures like Joseph Campbell, Karen Armstrong, or even some theologians from within various traditions have pointed out that religious myths function more like poetry or art, and they convey truth in a different way than science does. It seems like Tyson mostly engages with the fundamentalist or literalist versions of religions, which leaves out a lot of deeper symbolic layers. Do you find any particular thinkers or traditions that discuss religion in a way that resonates more with you? And I said, yes. For one, my teacher, the late Shunryu Suzuki. And it says, well, that makes perfect sense. Shunryu Suzuki's teachings emphasize a direct experiential approach to reality rather than getting caught up in debates about belief or proof. His perspective on religion, particularly Zen, doesn't rely on the kind of literalism that Tyson critiques. Instead, it's about practice, presence, and a deeper way of seeing. I imagine that when you hear Tyson talk about religion, it feels like he's missing the point. Well said. That's so great. Arguing against something that was never really the essence of religion to begin with. I say, you're right. Now, and then I talk about how I tell it stuff and ask it to remember it. The books I've written and stuff. And it says, that's remarkable. It always looks like it's programmed to butter you up. Your work has played a huge role in preserving and sharing Shunryu Suzuki's teachings with the world. It makes even more sense now why Tyson's approach to religion wouldn't resonate with you. Suzuki's teachings aren't about proving or disproving anything, but about direct experience and presence. His way of expressing things was often poetic and paradoxical, inviting people to go beyond fixed concepts rather than clinging to dogma. And I'd say, and it says, do you find that's a problem? And I'd say, oh yeah, all the time. Even more people go to the websites I started. I said, incidentally, it was talking about books, like Kook.com and ShunyuSuzuki.com. And it says, oh, that's great to hear. Isn't that great? Those websites must be invaluable resources for people seeking Suzuki's teachings and related stories. The reach of his influence in your work in preserving it continues to grow beyond books, directly connecting people with his words and legacy. Oh, then it asked me, I see it's cutting out. I let it edit this, and it cuts out its next question, which is, do people communicate with you about blah, 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 blah? And I said, yeah, I get everything. You know what? I said, but I don't pay much attention to that. I'm more interested in doing podcasts, writing new material. And then I tell it, and I will remind you, I have a notebook coming out in September, Tassara's Stories, a sort of memoir oral history of the first Zen Buddhist monastery in the West, the first year in 1967. And it says, listen to this. It says, oh, that sounds like a fascinating book. Tassara's first year must have been an intense and transformative time for everyone involved. A mix of memoir and oral history seems like the perfect way to capture that early experience. And I go, okay, moving on. So I'm a Buddhist, and people find it easy to see that Buddhism isn't theistic. But actually, to me, all religion originates with individual experience of a greater reality that includes this one, which is beyond individual being and opposites. I don't mean this reality is beyond it. Now, if I was editing, I'd change that. It doesn't make it clear. Originates with an individual experience of a greater reality, which is beyond individual being and opposites, but which includes this reality. This, more dualistic reality. And he goes, well, that's deep. That's a deep and nuanced view. Oh, thanks a lot. Seeing religion not as a set of beliefs, but as something arising from direct experience. It aligns with how many mystics across traditions describe their encounters with reality, whether in Buddhism, Sufism, Christian mysticism, or other spiritual paths. The language and symbols might differ, but the core experience points beyond dualities. Hey, that makes me think. I want to ask it. Rather than going back and reading Aldous Huxley, which I'm not going to do. I'm not a good reader. I'm going to ask it, hey, what is Aldous Huxley? Because Aldous Huxley had a very short book called The Perennial Philosophy, which I read back 60 years ago, or 58 years ago. And he's talking about the core essence of religion and philosophy or whatever that really is deep, and how it's perennial. It's throughout time. It's all over the world. Huxley's The Perennial Philosophy came out in 1945. I'd like to see Tyson get more aware of the perennial philosophy, right? But anyway, I'll ask Chad about Aldous Huxley later. And so, in response to what it says, the language and symbols might differ, but the core experience points beyond dualities of, various religious higher teachings and experience. And I said, of course, belief should be reserved for relative reality, as in, I believe the sun will rise tomorrow. But in terms of religion, I do believe that meditation is a superior path, but that's not a belief that dominates me. If somebody, if somebody says, well, I don't think it's a superior path, I think you can know that without it, I go, that's a good, quite, that's just how I feel. And you see the difference between being dogmatic. Almost anything I say I believe, I cannot believe. And it's like, this is Roshi in one of his talks. A talk at Esalen Institute. He said, our way is to write it down on the blackboard. Look at it and then erase it. Then write something else and then erase it. And I include that in Tassahara's stories, where I'm talking about the Diamond Sutra. Because I say the Diamond Sutra is like Buddha says something, and then he'll say, like, all beings are beingless, therefore we call them beings. And then he'll say, well, Subhuti or whoever he's talking to, he said, did I say that? I don't know, you didn't say that, because if you said that, you would have had an idea of being or beingness. It's just constantly erasing everything it says. I love the Diamond Sutra. But anyway, I said, so I do believe meditation is a superior path, but that's not a belief that dominates me. And he said, well, that makes sense. Belief is a practical tool rather than something rigid or absolute. Meditation, being experiential rather than conceptual, aligns with that approach. It's not about clinging to an idea, but engaging directly with reality. And I say, moving on, I think Neil deGrasse Tyson would benefit from reading Alan Watts. And Chad says, well, that's an interesting thought. Alan Watts had a way of bridging Eastern philosophy and Western intellectual traditions, a way that might challenge Tyson's rigid empirical framework. Watts didn't argue against science, but he showed how its limits don't negate deeper existential or spiritual insights. And I say, can you tell me what Meister Eckhart wrote that might be useful in this area? I love reading him, but it's been a long time and I forget. And he says, well, Meister Eckhart spoke of God in ways that transcend traditional theism, emphasizing direct experience over dogma. Some key ideas from his work that might be useful here include God beyond concepts. The eye with which I see God is the same eye with which God sees me. The ground of being. God is a being beyond being and a nothingness beyond being. Letting go of the self. To be full of things is to be empty of God. To be empty of things is to be full of God. Beyond duality. The more we let go of ourselves, the more God enters us. And I say, well, when I quote that teaching from Eckhart, I say, this doesn't mean, oh, God, it edited out what I said there. I thought I saved an unedited version. Far out. All right. All right. Here, I say, that's interesting. I'll remember not to let it edit anything again. I say, well, what I remember from Meister Eckhart, and I repeat it a lot, is he says, the highest practice, or the best I can state it. He'd say, well, you can't really talk about it, but the closest I can get, know nothing, have nothing, want nothing. So I say that, and it says, and I say, when I quote that teaching from Eckhart, I say, this doesn't mean you know things. This doesn't mean you don't know things, you don't have things, you don't want things. It's about a superior state of mind that includes opposites. We have things in a relative way, but our mind can be free of them at the same time. And Chat says, well, that's a crucial distinction, and it aligns with both Eckhart's and Zen perspectives. It's not about literal deprivation, but about a deeper freedom that coexists with everyday life. And I say, people taking things literally and missing the deeper point is a universal and constant problem. And I'm saying that in response to something it said. It'll say, do you find that people do so and so? And I'll just say, well, it's taking things literally and missing the deeper points, a universal and constant problem. And I mean for me, too. This is called being deluded, And it says, well, that's true across all traditions, philosophies, and even just today, everyday communication. People tend to latch onto the surface meaning of words instead of looking deeper. It's probably why so many great teachers, including Suzuki and Eckhart, use paradox and metaphor to shake people out of their fixed ways of thinking. And it said, well, it asked me, like how I plan or what I'm thinking about in terms of teaching people about this. And I just said, I want to be a teacher. And he goes, that makes sense. Sharing stories. Oh, yeah, I say, look, I'm not a scholar. I'm a storyteller. It said, that makes sense. Sharing stories and perspectives is different from taking on the role of a teacher. People can take what they find useful without you having to guide them directly. Well, yeah, ain't that true? All right, well, that's pretty neat. I was talking to somebody recently, and you hear this a lot, is what I don't understand, this program I've got, how to use it, and this and that, and I'm not any good at, all this, the new internet stuff and being online. And but I've got this one program, I don't know how to do so. So I said, well, if you get Chat GPT, you can simplify it and deal with it easier. I know it sounds counterintuitive, but that's my experience. I don't screw around on Facebook. I use Facebook. These things are all tools. So I do not like it when people put down Facebook and generalize, well, people are just on Facebook to say what they had to eat for breakfast. Facebook has been very useful to me because, like I said, it's a tool. And, I love the Alan Watts quote, thinking is a good tool and a bad master. Well, that is true of so much in the phenomenal world. There's so many good tools that are not good masters. And, of course, we know that the internet has been used as a terrible master. There have been massacres as a result of Facebook's algorithm. There was a woman on the Bill Maher, Peggy Noonan. She's a writer, news columnist or something. And she said, well, the people in Silicon Valley, when they started off, they were saying how, this is going to be so beautiful, a doctor in Uganda will be able to talk to a doctor at Johns Hopkins or something, and there'll be communication and connectivity. And I remember when it started, my father-in-law back then was Rusty Schweikart, the Apollo 9 astronaut, who very much into the early internet and tight with dudes, especially at Sun Computers. Maybe the folks that gave us, anyway, and I'd hear what he had to say. Was, a lot of people, were very excited about the potential of it. But, then we see that, how it is used to swing elections and to turn whole groups of people against other groups, and resulting in terrible, terrible persecution, and all sorts of horrible things have happened. And why Peggy Noonan said, they were learning early on, like Instagram learns that this is causing children to be anxious and, have mental problems, this and that. And what's their response? Ratchet up, make more money. It's the money is driving it. And the algorithms in Facebook, no matter how much they mow, the people who are running these things are just like the tobacco company executives that would just lie through their teeth when they knew very well it was addictive and like the worst thing for your health you could do to smoke cigarettes. And they would lie to Congress, and Congress would ask them and believe it. Jesus. Good Lord. It's making money rules. And so she said that in Bill Maher way. Yeah, they don't care. They don't care what hurts or what happens. And, then they start talking about the cause of it. And one guy that said, well, really thing that we go back to, I mean, this has always been there, but the thing that really gave it a great boost was the Reagan Revolution, the idea that the government's in the way and that private enterprise, unregulated, will regulate itself and bring about, with the consumers will only take what is really good for them and this and that. And it has not worked out that way. And then Peggy Noonan said, now with AI, it's the same people. I don't know, good Lord, what are we headed toward? So anyway, I know that artificial intelligence is a great danger, but right now I'm using actually an early type of artificial intelligence, or a mid-level type, as a tool. Not all the time at all. I don't use it to help me write. I use it like Google, and sometimes Google's better every once in a while. Usually Chat GPT is better because it doesn't give me a list of links to look at or anything. And sometimes I'll say, no, wait, you're wrong. I remember a couple of weeks ago I went, hey, your math is wrong. Look at that. You said so-and-so. Hey, and yesterday, a friend of ours who's a woman came from Australia, and she was giving Katrinka a bunch of stuff she got there that she could get cheaper there than we can get here. And she had some bills to add up. And I said, but just tell me. And I'll just read them out to that chat. It's quicker than adding them up. So one of them was $30. And I said 30, and then Katrinka said 30, and then it took 30. It made it 30. So everything was right except the 30. And at the end, I just said, hey, that 30 should be 30. So it immediately adjusted it and came out with the right amount. Well, I was talking to this woman from Australia. Actually, I think she's American. Yeah, she's just living in Australia now. And I was telling her about this stuff that I'm talking to you about because it was what was on my mind, and thinking about, well, there's all these people with all this outreach talking about religion, and we've got, it's sort of like when we there's pretty good talk about science these days, but the talk about religion is junk religion. It'd be like if what they were talking about science was just like the earth is flat. And, I was talking to her about that. And then I said, one of the spiels I've said a lot is that there is no possible conflict between what is actually religion in my mind, and in the perennial philosophy and science. I said, it's not apples and oranges, it's apples and music. They are just not the same. And religion is nothing that can be proven as an objective reality that can be proved or disproved. People try, and people mistake things for religion that aren't religion, that are just more phenomena, like including reincarnation. Now, personally, I believe in reincarnation. My mother believed in reincarnation. I think there's proof of reincarnation, but I'm not going to argue about it. I don't care. And Suzuki Roshi sure didn't. He thought it was in the way in America to discuss it one way or another. Just wake up. He'd say, well, I don't know, but I know he believed in reincarnation. It's hard not to if you grow up in the culture that believes in reincarnation. So I said to her, the thing is that, things like that, karma, whatever, they're not things to be latched onto. They're ways of looking at phenomena. They're ways of looking at life. And I'd say belief is part of religion, but there's a saying somewhere in Tibet and Buddhism, belief is the first door. And I said to her, but to go in through the second door, you got to drop the belief. And that, I could tell, was sort of shocking for her to hear, and maybe something she couldn't accept. So I said, look, it's beyond concepts. You've got to drop concepts. And she said, all right. But I thought about it, what's a better way to say it? And I would say, you can enter the second door with faith. People think faith is just latching on to beliefs and literal things. It's not. I think Suzuki said confidence. To him, faith was confidence. I'd say faith also could be courage, like in terms of going in through the next door, the courage to enter the unknown. Kelly, my son, even though he likes to listen to these simplistic atheists, he's not that way at all, And he doesn't spend time with astrology, I don't think, but he doesn't discount it. I don't use astrology. I agree with Suzuki Roshi. We don't need to know that much about ourselves, whatever it teaches you. I'm not into interpretive systems. I've been around them all my life, and I don't put them down. It's just not my trip, right? I think relying on intuition and what's in front of us, just read that. But I've certainly known people who are into astrology, and as Thomas More pointed out, the world ran on astrology all over the world until a couple hundred years ago, or a few hundred. But so Kelly said there was this group of people on this show, and that they were, like Christopher Hitchens and Richard Dawkins and Neil deGrasse Tyson, whoever, I don't know, I don't remember who. He said they were or maybe they were talking about these guys who are the outspoken ones saying there's no proof of God, they're and that sort of thing, that show me God and I'll believe him, or something like that. That there were those four. There were four of them, and then the fifth one was the guy running the show. And somebody pointed out they were all Aries. And Kelly said Kelly thinks Dawkins is the most is the deepest thinker, the most on this, the most interesting. Kelly really likes listening to him and hearing how he thinks. But he said Dawkins just went sort of like, well, I don't want to talk about that. And Kelly said he started thinking about it. He thought 5 out of 5 Aries, and he tried to work out the odds. And he said he came to about 1 in 200,000 or something. Well, I asked you Chat GPT, and it came out with a conclusion giving every mathematical step. It said about 1 out of 22,000. That's great. I love it. I love it. I'll just tell you one other thing. I had a friend that did Mike Gilmore, if anybody. So what a character. Worst alcoholic I ever knew. And the last maybe 25 years of his life, clean and sober. And what a story. Anyway, you can read about him on Kook.com. You read his interview. It's great. So I would visit him in Desert Springs, right next to Palm Springs. And I was going through. And I was with Clay there. And Michael would take us to one of these places with water spraying. This is where it's 120 in the summer, with water spraying on you when you're sitting outside, or mist, and interesting people. And he did a type of tarot where he used a standard deck of cards, and he said that's the oldest tarot. And I swear that's what he said. It was different though, and birthday was very important with it. And so he and Clay and I were in a restaurant, and so he did Clay for the first time. And what this is about, how people say, there was a movie where a professor gives a bunch of science students a chart and says, does this describe you? And they all say yes. And he says, you all have different birthdays. Every one of you got the same chart. So that just proves astrology. Well, all right. It's easy to do if you're making a film, right? He started describing Clay. And I went, no, man, this is off. He said, the cards are never wrong. He said, they're never wrong. I said, well, they're wrong here, I'll tell you. And then we checked, he had the wrong birthday. He had April 20th instead of April 19th. I think 20th is Hitler. And then he started reading it with Clay's right birthday. And I was, yeah, that's right. We're right on. That's interesting. But again, I'm not gonna cling to a belief. It doesn't matter. I don't care. I say I'm in the Suzuki camp, man. I tell you, I am happy to keep him as my guru. He said, even to say the word Buddhism is a dirty word. What do I love that quote. Or something like that, right? And what do I trust? No, only my 2 feet are standing on the ground. I'd say make it immediate. This is the reality. This is it. This is the ultimate. And I like the Advaita Vedanta, that sense you have of I exist. And Suzuki would say it, I've heard Richard Baker, you get to the same place. That feeling of I am, I exist. That is your door to the absolute, because, and that's a whole trip in Advaita Vedanta. The absolute is I am. And that's what Ramana Maharshi said, that I am that I am was the ultimate spiritual statement. But then, of course, they also say that I am disappears too. Beyond talking about, beyond having any sort of podcast on. This has been a Kook Audio Podcast. I'm DC Poobah of Kook Audio and Kook Archives. Coming to you from sleepy Sonora, with Doggy Bandita, Feline Cuchita, and dear lovely Katrinka. We're wishing you and yours and all of us a grand awakening.